This episode is brought to you by Bumble. So, you want to find someone you're compatible with, specifically someone who's ready for a serious connection, totally open to having kids in the future, is a tall, rock-climbing Libra, and loves rom-coms with vegan pizzas on Tuesdays just as much as you do. Bumble knows that you know exactly what's right for you. So whatever it is you're looking for, Bumble's features can help you find it. Date now on Bumble.
If you're an athlete, you know the greatest motivator of all is the fear of letting your teammates down. After all, a team is only as good as its weakest link. So you owe it to those wearing the same jersey as you to be your best every time you step on the field. That's why there's no vape in team. When you vape, you can expose your lungs to toxic chemicals that can damage your lungs. If you're a step behind, the team's a step behind. Brought to you by The Real Cost and the FDA.
Get the whole band together with Workday and pair finance and HR on one platform for an epic performance. With Workday AI at the core, you'll make confident decisions faster than ever, and you'll drive flawless business and finance operations with an agile platform that constantly evolves to future-proof your organization. Be a finance and HR rockstar with Workday. Visit Workday.com to learn more.
Welcome to the AI Hustle Podcast, the podcast where we break down the latest in AI news, tools, and interview experts helping you hustle and do more using AI. If you've been following the podcast for a while, you'll know that over the last 6 months, I've been working on a stealth AI startup. Of the hundreds of projects I've covered, this is the one that I believe has the greatest potential. So today I'm excited to announce AI Box. AI Box is a no-code AI app building platform paired with the App Store for AI that lets you monetize your AI tools. The platform lets you build apps by linking together AI models like ChatGPT, Midjourney, and 11 Labs. Eventually will integrate with software like Gmail, Trello, and Salesforce, so you can use AI to automate every function in your organization. To get notified when we launch and be one of the first to build on the platform, you can join the waitlist at aibox.ai. The link is in the show notes. We are currently raising a seed round of funding. If you're an investor that is focused on disruptive tech, I'd love to tell you more about the platform. You can reach out to me at jaden@aibox.ai. I'll leave that email in the show notes. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about a very popular but also controversial topic, and that is people's view of AI in general. And specifically, we're going to be talking a little bit about how people are thinking about this when it comes to, politics and everything in that nature. So this is going to be an interesting podcast. Buckle up. Let's dive in. I think the first thing to say is that a significant majority of U.S. voters, and this is members of both the Republican and Democratic, those are two major parties in the U.S., have expressed their concerns about the risks associated with AI. So I think there's kind of this broad appeal for federal intervention to kind of mitigate some of these risks. A lot of people are interested in that. And I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. I'm just saying I hear that a lot. And I think in a recent poll by a newly formed Artificial Intelligence Policy Institute, this data has been, shared with a number of different organizations. In particular, Axios reported on it. And so there was a couple of really interesting little stats I wanted to cover. So something that I thought was interesting, if we're kind of diving a little bit deeper into the numbers, the data actually shows that there is a big preference among respondents of this survey for federal oversight of AI rather than just letting tech companies kind of police themselves. This is kind of interesting, and it's interesting because I hear two different perspectives on this, especially when you're talking about politics. I feel like you'll see liberals and progressives talking about the fact that there is different biases in these AI models that they're worried are going to harm people or perpetrate, harmful biases, and so they would like the government to actually help enforce the regulation to avoid those. That's what I'm hearing from that side. And then from the Republican GOP side of things, I'm hearing them talking about the fact that they feel like these AI models have biases towards liberal ideologies, and they're worried that there's not a neutral, unbiased approach. They're worried that their perspectives are not being reflected in these AI models. And so it's kind of interesting because it's, essentially there's different complaints, but they're from two different sides of things. That's what I'm hearing. So according to their surveys, an overwhelming 82% expressed their skepticism, saying they didn't place their trust in tech executives to adequately regulate AI. And this is kind of interesting that we're seeing both sides of the aisle, people from all walks of life in the United States, essentially not trusting the tech companies and wanting the government to come in and regulate it. And it's interesting because they would like it to be regulated in different ways, but I think there's kind of this broad distrust. We're seeing that, right? 82% skepticism and distrust for tech executives, as essentially people are believing they're not going to do what they would, what they're saying they will do or what they think they should do. So I think another statistic came out that said more than half, I think around 56% of people surveyed are in favor of a designated federal agency taking charge of AI regulation. And only 14% actually opposed such a move. And I think this is also very interesting. This is not surprising in any way to me that there's, a bunch of people saying we need a special AI agency. I think the big concern, probably both from the left and the right, is the fact that the government is not traditionally very tech savvy. Like just getting some random person from the government to be in charge of AI, for example, like let's say you got your vice president and just said, Kamala Harris, you're in charge of AI, which I think we did. It doesn't give a lot of confidence to the voter, considering Kamala Harris has no experience in, or background in AI and, what that entails. And it's kind of embarrassing sometimes when she talks about it. Now, I'm not saying if Kamala Harris is a good or bad person, but, let's be pragmatic. Let's look at her track record. She has a track record with AI. Therefore, a lot of people are skeptical about her being in charge of AI. I don't think that's too controversial to say. What I will say in regard to that is I think it's really big to see only 14% of people opposing a specific agency for AI, right? I think their concern is that it's going to get thrown out to the vice president or to some members of Congress, or there's going to be a panel of people that aren't experts on this, and they don't want that. They say, let's just make an agency that specializes in this, that knows the problems, that knows the pros and cons, and that can regulate it according to that. I tend to kind of agree with that approach, and it would appear that a majority of Americans do, and a majority of Americans are not, opposed to that. So I think that is kind of interesting. So I think, some of the significance of the findings here, finding, common ground on policy matters is really hard to do in today's day and age. American politics is incredibly divided. It's very polarized. And I think that, a really strong endorsement of fresh federal mandates is very hard to find from the right or the left. And so I think that, this new poll kind of sheds some light on these, essentially this gradually diminishing trust that we have in the tech giants. People are not very trustworthy from any perspective of tech giants and what they're doing, and they have a lot of skepticism that they're doing what's in their best interest, because at the end of the day, they have a board of directors, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their own company and not necessarily to the American people. So I think if we're kind of unpacking the data, there was around 1,001 participants surveyed. This was between July 18th and 21st, so relatively recently. And another interesting statistic from this is that 62% of people expressed varying degrees of concern over AI, while only 21% indicated they were somewhat or largely excited by it. So I think this is interesting. Like a pretty strong majority has concerns, and a small minority is just purely excited, right? I think there was a lot of pure excitement and hype at the beginning, but as we start to kind of see its limitations and what it does, and it becomes, less of this wow factor, now people are starting to say, well, I do have some concerns about X, Y, and Z. So a massive 72% are in favor of a more measured pace of AI development, contrasted with 8% that are advocating for acceleration. So this is, again, very interesting, right? Usually when there's technology, everyone's like, I wish this iPhone was twice as fast, twice as thin, and could do X, Y, and Z extra things. Let's accelerate the technology here. Like, that would be something that I would expect to hear. But when the implications of AI are so vast, I think people really are quite cautious and want to take a very measured approach with it, which I think is wise and something that, we are sort of seeing in some ways, but in others, we definitely are far from that. So I think there is a shared sentiment among around 3/4 of both Democrats and Republican respondents that they think there is the potential existential threat AI could pose to humanity. So that is also very interesting. And a staggering 86% of survey respondents said that AI might inadvertently trigger a catastrophic incident. So that is close to 90%. Pretty much everyone agrees that there is the potential that AI triggers a catastrophic incident. And I mean, if you look at the rate that AI is getting integrated into the enterprise, into healthcare, into the military, into all different sectors, and if we've seen the capabilities it has, it is something that a lot of people are worried about. So if we kind of move to kind of the global sentiments on AI regulation, U.S. adults are not isolated in their preference for a more regulated AI landscape over, just kind of like a laissez-faire approach. So an international study on AI actually came from KPMG earlier in February, and it found that out of 17 major nations, a majority, which is 71%, agreed on a necessity for AI regulation. The UK is also kind of weighing in on the debate, while many are very optimistic about AI's potential benefits, like expedited airport procedures and enhanced cancer detection. I think a concurrent survey revealed that 62% of British adults advocate for established laws governing AI use. But there are a few different caveats to consider here. So I think, this kind of widespread endorsement for AI regulation doesn't automatically translate to faith in democratic governments to craft effective regulations. In the KPMG report, there's plenty of skepticism. I think there was only 49% of US, 47% of Japan, and 45% of the UK respondents expressed confidence in their respective government's ability to oversee AI, right? So that is less than 50% in all of those major countries. And you can contrast that to higher trust levels that were recorded in China. 86% of Chinese respondents said they trusted their government, 70% from India, and 60% from Singapore. Now, that I would say is, again, a very interesting report, right? So let's break down China, for example. China, as we know, the respondents there likely had the government. They know that the government can see what they're doing. So do you think that asking a Chinese citizen who's being actively spied on or watched by their government if they trust their government to do something would say yes or no? So there's definitely a big conflict there. India, though, I think is probably not going to experience that same conflict, and they probably genuinely have trust of their government. Now, one thing I will say about India, though, the caveat there is that I believe their Prime Minister, Modi, if you look at the statistics of approval ratings by country, Modi, I think, has the highest approval rating of any elected government official in the world. And so, maybe that is a reason why people there have trust that he's going to make the right move. I don't know too much about his policies or politics, but just from data I see, he is the most, he has the highest approval rating. Maybe there's caveats there. People from India can let me know. So that may also impact that. Singapore, 60%. I don't have much to say about that. But I think despite a lot of lowering trust levels in recent times, I think Americans continue to kind of have an overall positive perception of technology, as underscored by Edelman's annual Trust Barometer report that actually came out to say Americans generally trust technology. So Daniel Coulson, who is the executive director of the Artificial Intelligence Policy Institute, which advocates a more kind of circumspect approach to AI rollout, said to Axios recently, quote, "Americans are wary about the next stages of AI and want policymakers to step in to develop it responsibly." So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes, to see what kind of policy is rolled out, and to see who is in charge of it. Definitely something we'll be following very closely in the future. If you are looking for an innovative and creative community of people using ChatGPT, you need to join our ChatGPT creators community. I'll drop a link in the description to this podcast. We'd love to see you there, where we share tips and tricks of what is working in ChatGPT. It's a lot easier than a podcast, as you can see screenshots, you can share and comment on things that are currently working. So if this sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the comment. We'd love to have you in the community. Thanks for tuning in to the AI Hustle podcast. If you could do us a massive favor, we would really, really appreciate it if you could leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. This helps people find the podcast. It helps people know this is a good place to go. And we would really, really appreciate it, as it helps us continue to bring on incredible guests and share incredible content for you to listen to.